Rachel Kyte, Special Representative to the UN Secretary General on Sustainable Energy for All and CEO of Sustainable Energy for All. Thank you very much to agreeing for an interview for my book, A Restored Earth. Rachel,
my pleasure.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you to begin by describing what you do and what the challenge is.
So I have the great privilege of sitting somewhere close to the centre of an extraordinary movement of political leaders in countries, CEOs of companies, small, large, new startups, big established companies, and city leaders and civil society organisations and investors from big banks to impact investors, all of whom are wanting to be or determined to be part of a movement that drives an energy transition. And the origins of this movement are around the need for sustainable energy. Without sustainable energy for all, we don't get to where we need to be under the Paris Climate Agreement, and Sustainable Energy for All became one of the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. So this movement sort of started growing and predates those agreements, and in part was a reason why those agreements happened. And after 2015, when we achieved the SDGs universally and unanimously, and we achieved the Paris Agreement, the pivot was to, well, how do we get this done? So what I do is marshal the evidence for what it's going to take to arrive at the Sustainable Development Goal in 2030. And in the context of Paris, that means that we need to decarbonise our energy system. So by 2030, we said we would have universal access to energy, we would have a doubling of the rate of energy efficiency, and we would have the doubling of the amount of renewable energy in the energy system. So if you work back from 2030 and you look at where we are today, my job is to illuminate a critical path, and where do we need to be and what needs to be happening where in order for us to be on a pathway to achieving that.
Thank you, Rachel. And how's it going? What progress is being made, and is it happening fast enough?
Well, the good news is that there is definitely an energy transition underway. We are producing more energy with less emissions in many parts of the world. We see an extraordinary growth in renewable energy technologies, the prices of which have fallen by 75% in the last 5 to 6 years. And so we see real progress in sort of understanding how to build smart grids and how to manage the demand for electricity so that we can do more with less. And because of those falling prices of technologies and because of new business models, and in Africa in particular because of the revolution that comes on the back of mobile telephony and mobile banking through telephony, you have the potential to see large inroads into the number of people who don't have access to energy. The bad news is that I can give you many, many, many examples of what's happening that's amazing, but we are lacking speed and scale. And there are some parts of the world, whether it comes to energy efficiency, the need for progress on energy efficiency, need for progress on renewables, or the need for progress on access, where either we're still at a standing start or things are just not moving quickly enough. The good news is that there's a sort of an approach both to the policy, to the access to the finance, and to the technology, which is not a mystery. The bad news is that we don't somehow seem to have mobilised the political will to really drive for results in these areas. And when it comes to closing the energy access gap, I think that's one story. And I think when it comes to achieving much greater rates of progress in energy efficiency, it's another. So, we say that we need to double the rate of energy efficiency. Effectively, we need to triple it because we're just not moving fast enough. And every year we don't move fast enough, then the gap between where we need to be and where we are gets bigger. And the one way to think about it is that if we just take developed countries, everybody's improving. But there's a huge variance between the performance of some developed countries and others when it comes to energy efficiency. So a shorthand is that, everybody needs to become a little bit more like Denmark, and Denmark needs to become a little bit like something we've never seen before if we're going to have the kind of energy productivity in our economy that we need. In the United States, every state needs to become a little bit more like California, and California needs to transform itself into the most energy productive economy in the world. That's the size of the challenge. And then, when it comes to access to energy, there are countries now that have, solar home systems and microgrids and mini-grids being funded by private equity and by debt from, commercial and impact investors, and we can see real speed of development and market share, but it's in few countries. So how do we see that kind of progress everywhere that we need to, and how do we persuade ministers that and others that the energy systems of the past, where you had a centralized, carbonized grid that pumped out energy to as many people as it could afford to reach and then stopped when the money ran out, that's not going to be how people get their energy in the future. People are going to get energy from decarbonized, decentralized, digitalized energy systems. And we have to build the policy framework for that world, and it will come if we do.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rachel. The book I'm trying to write is an optimistic one. It doesn't make any illusions about the scale that's required of the change that we're trying to bring about. But nevertheless, it's going to try to draw attention to good examples of where we're already doing the right thing, and to argue that effectively if we could scale those fast, we would be in with a good shout and transforming the planet which we all inhabit. And I just wondered if there were a few examples, you've already mentioned one or two, that you could potentially elaborate a bit further, where you feel we already have the prototype of the kind of system that we now need to bring to scale.
Yeah, and I think that, I'll give you a couple of examples, but I think just to preface that, what we see is that, in many parts of the world and in many conversations, you can see that people doubt that it can be done. They doubt that renewable energy can really be the kind of reliable, baseload power source that we need. They doubt that some of the off-grid stuff can really be big enough or significant enough to really bring about that transformation. But if you can just close your eyes and imagine what's going to happen when power comes to communities, it isn't just about providing an energy source. It's what that energy does, right? So that energy allows you to do ambulatory care in a clinic with sophisticated instruments, right? Mm-hmm. Because it allows you to reduce your maternal mortality rate. It allows you to heat a school, and so the kids actually learn more. It allows so there's no reason why you wouldn't embrace the possibility that we can now see because of technology and because of new business models and because of finance, etc. So we're asking people. We're asking people to suspend belief a little bit, because we can begin to see it happening around the world, and it could happen where you are too. Mm-hmm. And part of what we need is political leaders to sort of say, this is the world I want to see. And so one of the things that we do in Sustainable Energy for is literally ask political leaders to close their eyes and imagine that it's 2024, right, or 2027. Mm-hmm. And so it's 10 years hence, And this is what your community looks like because you've got power, and you've got reliable, affordable, clean power. And we walk them through what might be happening in that community because of it. And say, okay, now open your eyes, now how do we get there? Because if you don't do that, you're just always thinking about the old way of doing things and the fact that you need lots of billions of dollars to build another independent power plant, and then you've got the problem of losses, and then you've got corruption, and so blah, blah, blah. So we actually believe that there's something transformative about the story. So then what are the stories? Well, I think the one that's really exciting, is walking into a home and this could be in a rural area, or it could be in a refugee camp, or it could be underneath the power lines, in the outskirts of Nairobi or Dar or Arusha or somewhere like that. And you walk into the home, and on the roof is a small solar panel, and that is powering 3 super efficient light bulbs, a super efficient radio, a super efficient small television, and a super efficient fan. And that is being paid for through the cell phone, and the minutes, you're paying for it like you would pay for minutes. And the transformative effect of that is extraordinary because it's safer. The kids can read. You're informed. You've got a television, and that's just just a few watts. If you put another solar panel up on another one, then you could get a refrigerator with all of that, the promise that holds. You can put drugs in there. You can obviously keep food fresh, and that becomes a very important part of this. The other thing is that with those lamps are cell phone chargers, so you're charging 2 or 3 cell phones. So you're beginning to get. So when you walk into these households and you talk to the women, and normally it's the woman that's got the account, right? And you talk to them and you see how they begin to then imagine possibility. So the goal is to get to productive use, right? So the goal is to get enough power that they can work from home, they can have a small business, they can grow a small business, that the neighbour is taking people in and charging their cell phones, etc. And the other one is to go into a refugee camp and see a shipping container that has been dumped down in the middle of the refugee camp, and that the shipping container has a series of batteries which are powered by solar panels on the roof of the container. So it's like a pop-up thing. You open it up like a cardboard box, and all these things come out of it. Those batteries then power a couple of refrigerators. So you're selling water and keeping drugs cool, and you've got soft drinks or something like that. You're letting people charge their phones, and you are maybe there's a big screen television on the back of the container, and you're basically creating a sort of village square in the middle of a displaced person situation or in the middle of the refugee camp. And all of that can be done for a few $1,000s. And that can be just like, medevaced in, right, and dumped down, and you pop it open and it's ready to go. And it can be popped up and taken away whenever you don't need it anymore. So this is what the price of technology and the technology can do, that transforms the life of the most vulnerable people, of those who need to get into a role where they can be productive within the economy. At the same time, I can take you just round the corner in Kenya into the factory floor of Burn. Burn make efficient cook stoves. So these cook stoves burn 70% less charcoal than the normal cook stove. And this is what 620 million Africans still depend upon for cooking. It's even more than that, but we know that for sure. And so when you burn 60 to 70% less charcoal, you save yourself the cost of this cooker within a very short period of time. You make enormous savings over the course of the year, but then also the quality of the air inside your house is so much better. They're also more efficient, so you can cook more quickly. So you've got an improvement in the quality of life of the woman. You've got an improvement in her pocketbook, as it were, and you've got an improvement in the health of her and her kids and anybody else that's in that house. Now, you go to the Bern factory, they're importing some of the basic materials, but they're manufacturing these stoves in Kenya, and so they're employing people. And if you walk through the production line in that factory, half of the people on that production line are women, many of the heavy machine operators are women, and many of the supervisors are women. And so, here you've got local people being trained into semi-technical, this is technical labour, right? They're trained for it, they're operating heavy machinery, they're getting good income, they're getting good, strong, salaries. It's a good firm that's growing. And so this is the belief that, the new economy is going to be an economy that can work for more people and provide more people with what they need. Because these people are living underneath the power lines at the moment. The power is just evacuating straight over their heads, as are the jobs.
It's a very powerful vision, Rachel, and it's very inspiring. And I assume that in every country around the world, developed and developing, there are choices to be made, and political leadership, as you say, is required. And countries can either choose to invest in these kinds of systems and and enable these kinds of technologies and enterprises to flourish, or they can continue with the business as usual model, effectively.
Yeah, and I think that in the past the debate is being framed by, okay, if we're going to get people, if we're going to get enough power for the economy to grow, then we need X many more gigawatts, and that's going to cost X many more billions of dollars, and it's about building big projects linking into grids. Well, yes, if you're going to have a manufacturing base, and if you're going to industrialise, and you're going to run the power for big cities, you need to have smart grids that can accommodate different energy from renewables and from fossil fuels, etc. You're going to need all of that. But if you ask yourself a different question, and if you can say, what will it take for us to get everybody enough watts to be able to be productive in the economy, and how many watts do we have to get to the cities and our businesses in order to be able to industrialise, you come out with a slightly different answer, because yes, you're going to need investments in that smart grid. You're going to need investments in energy efficiency of the supply, but you're also going to need investments in the quickest, cheapest way to get people the watts that they need to be productive in the economy. And today, for the first time, it's cheaper and easier and quicker to build mini-grids than it is to subsidise the utility and subsidise the old, badly performing, creaking grid to go out to another household, and then another household, and another household. And so for the first time, governments who, the promise of power is a very important electoral promise that is made again and again and again, right? And trips people up at the ballot box again and again and again. But now, if you embrace integrated solutions, so both grid and off-grid, on the off-grid side, you can move really quickly and it's cheaper. And so for the first time, if you're an African leader or a leader in South Asia or whatever, you actually have an option that is there, tantalisingly close to you. And those countries that are pursuing that option are seeing connections grow at quite an incredible rate. And if you talk to the guys who are making business doing off-grid solutions, they believe that they can go 2, 3 times as fast as they are at the moment, if market conditions were a little bit more supportive.
And how many people...
So when they set those goals, I think when they set the goal, they thought it was like aspirational. It's not an aspirational goal. This is actually doable. It'll be hard, but it's doable.
It's doable, yes, indeed. And how many people in the world at the moment, Rachel, don't have access to energy? Could you kindly remind the listener of the numbers?
Yeah, it's today we say 1.2 billion. 1.2 billion people without access to electricity. that's roughly spread with 620 million in Africa, and the rest in South Asia in particular and other parts of Asia. I think in Latin America there's about 300,000 people who don't have access to electricity, and then that's sort of spread over sort of remote highland communities in Central America and the Andes. But then in Haiti we have a very particular issue where there's a very high percentage of the population in Haiti without access to reliable, affordable, clean energy. There's a separate story then which is access to clean cooking, and there the number that we've been using for the last 2 years is 2.9 billion people. But on April the 3rd we'll be launching a revised data set on how well we're doing in progressing towards the goal. And that will say that that number's actually increased. And the problem we have in clean cooking is that there is progress around the world, and there's particularly dynamic progress in parts of Indonesia and India, where government leaders have sort of really committed to closing the gap. But that's outpaced by the growth of the global population. And so population momentum is beating us at the moment. So we're running to stand still.
And so that 2.9 billion cook stoves, that number's likely to increase.
That's going to be revised up. Yeah, that will be revised up to around 3.1 billion, I think, in the next report.
Okay. And I've heard you speak about this issue in developed countries as well, including in the UK. And I wanted to ask you for a perspective on a developed country where energy access is poor in parts, in some areas of marginalised communities, before returning to the core challenge, which is in developing countries.
Yeah, well, I mean, the same thing holds for developed countries. You know, in places in Germany where people are, you know, at the community level building, you know, sort of mini grids and microgrids alongside their grid, and it gives them resilience, it gives them a cheaper option, it gives them a cleaner option, perhaps, and and they can sell power back to the grid if they so wish. So that's been something that we've seen. And we've also seen in the west of the United States, in particular, where the grid power is maybe not as reliable and doesn't, you know, in some parts of the west it doesn't reach, or it's expensive, it's perceived to be expensive, or it doesn't reach with consistency. And you've seen communities embracing solar and wind technologies and going off the grid. And they do it both for economic and social reasons, but also there's a piece of being independent of government, which is a particular strain of culture in the United States. And those communities, you know, now find themselves with options to go off the grid. And of course, you know, the problem there then becomes the economic viability of a utility which makes its money by selling you electricity. But you also see remote communities in Canada and North America, in particular, indigenous communities who, in many cases in the United States, have real problems securing good services of all kinds. You know, for some of the reservations in the west of the United States, then again, off-grid options become, you know, particularly attractive for the Inuit in Canada, as for the nomadic peoples of Mongolia. You know, having solar panels on your yurt and as you move around in the summer becomes a very viable, cheaper, effective way of powering. And then I think there are the real issues around energy efficiency for people living in least developed countries and for people living in the developed world. If you're paying for expensive power, then the less power that you need, the better. And so the impending revolution in super efficiency of appliances, I think, will be really important in allowing people who can afford very little for power in developing countries to access the services they want that power to give them. But it's also going to be really important for low-income families in the United Kingdom, the United States, across Europe. So if you've got, you know, a badly built house and an old-fashioned cooker in the northwest of England, and you're putting 50p in the meter, then, you know, there's something we can do about that. So, refurbishment of housing stock, using new building materials and to meet new building codes for new stock, and then super efficient appliances within those houses offer the possibility of affordable power because you're using much less.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's brilliant. I'm writing about mission innovation in the book, and I wondered whether there's a need for new technologies in this area, or do we have enough in the world to crack the sustainable energy for all challenge with existing technologies?
So that's a really good question. I think there's two things here. One is that a lot of the technology that's already available gets us an awful long way towards the target, but it's not diffused in the economy. It's not deployed to many of the places where it could be used, and that's something that is an age-old problem, and that's something that we need to work on. But the new technologies are needed, in particular in the ability to store energy. So with more and more renewables coming into the grid, or more and more renewables being used, the ability to store the energy that they provide, so that when the sun is gone or when the wind has died, you still have the ability to access that energy. That becomes very important, and that's both sort of battery technology, and of course that's sort of very much focused on sort of some of the promise that people associate with Elon Musk and others. So if we can improve battery technology, then you open up much more possibility for renewables. But it's not just batteries, it's also new design of hydro, so that you're sort of using water to store the energy, and other sort of landscape methods of storing. And I think then the other area, which is somewhat contentious, but there is a group of people and researchers and a number of policymakers who really believe that next generation nuclear technologies will be deployable in a very, very short period of time, and that they are going to be much safer, and that they will be much more portable and much cheaper than they are at the moment. And so I think that's one area where there's a mission innovation, certainly that some of the members of Mission Innovation and the Breakthrough Coalition associated with it are very interested in that. The final thing I would say is, if you look at the major projections on how we get to a decarbonised energy system by the mid-century, then it does depend on carbon capture, storage and use. So this is the idea that you can capture carbon from fossil fuel power generation or from some kind of big industrial activity, and either use it or capture it. I think more and more people are interested in using it. So there are experiments in Iceland where you use carbon to make stone, you use carbon to grow algae, so these kind of closed-loop technologies. And I think it's difficult to imagine how we get to mid-century on the track we need to be on unless we make some breakthroughs in carbon capture and use.
I'm sure you're right. And I've just seen a paper by Johan Rockström that's arguing for a kind of Moore's law for carbon, which suggests that we need to make these massive cuts in carbon emissions to reach these goals, even greater than we had thought, perhaps, but that it can be done.
Yeah, I think he's right. But what's really interesting is I read that paper too. Is that earlier this week, IEA and IRENA put out how they think things are going, and they don't. Well, I mean, they're different kinds of organisations, but you don't see the urgency in them, and you don't necessarily see. I think IEA tends to sort of draw a line out and say, well, this is how much progress we made in the past, and therefore this is how much progress we make in the future. So they're not looking at the kinds of curves that Johan is. And then I think IRENA, were a little coy, I think, this week, and that they just look at renewables. They don't look at all of the associated technologies. So, but we're going to have to either price carbon or find another way to drive it out of the economy, or multiple ways to drive it out of the economy. And Johan's right in that regard.
Rachel, I wanted to ask you about the sort of international politics and alliances that are required to deliver on your wonderful mission. And I noted at Marrakesh at the most recent climate change COP the commitment by dozens of small island developing states and others to achieve 100% renewable energy, I think, by 2050. And I look at other global alliances which have made great progress, and I look at the Montreal Protocol and so on. And I wondered whether you could reflect on what's required sort of globally to make this happen. Is it coalitions of the willing? Is it going to happen from the bottom up, or do we require big global agreements on carbon prices and fossil fuel subsidy reform, etc.? I'd love your views on all of that.
So it's a very good question. I think you need coalitions of the willing to keep pushing the boundaries of what people believe is necessary and important and doable. And those coalitions of the willing or the working, as I used to call them, they're important because they generate a lot of the sort of best practice and do some of the innovation on the front end. So I remember when we were working I was working on the Climate and Clean Air Coalition on short-lived climate pollutants. It was out of that coalition that the need for sort of methane auctions and everything was sort of discussed, and it was that then spurred my team at the World Bank at that time to start doing methane auctions and finding new financing for the methane reducing technologies. So I think that we need those working coalitions. I mean, every now and again we need to sort of be reminded about, globally, where we are and where we're not. But what's really needed now is for countries and, cities and other jurisdictions to sort of get on with the job of managing sort of an economic transformation, or managing the transitions that will drive that transformation. And that means that all of this stuff has got to be integrated into sort of development planning. And sort of the policy framework has to be set, even lightly, to entice, encourage and support the private sector to deliver these goals for you. And there I think that business as usual for the development committee. The development community is a thing of the past as well, because it's not, you can't fly in, fly out, and it's not about a PowerPoint, and it's not about a data set on its own, right? Then it's about, so how strong is your Ministry of Planning and Development? How good is the central bank's rules on, how much risk banks can take? How good is your banking regulator when it comes to small, medium-sized enterprise loans? Because, most micro and mini grid operators are going to be SMEs, right? So it's about integrated development planning that jumps on and then drives forward the opportunities in the new ways of doing things that we see, in my case in energy, but you could be talking about other things as well. And so then, most countries, the energy ministry may be in good shape, but may not have enough people who know about what the technological options are, what new pathways and alternatives are. You may have a utility that's, on the edge of economic viability, may have a real constraint in management, may not have a lot of the leadership that it needs. You may have a regulator which is institutionally weak, and blah, 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 blah. So we're asking, countries have signed up to and agreed on a pathway which is a total transformation of the economy. We're going to grow and give everybody everything that they need in a totally decarbonised energy system, transport system, etc. Well, and we're asking them to do it without the institutions, without the roadmaps, without the policies. Where do we lay on? Where does the support come to build the managerial bandwidth and the institutional capability to manage this transition? This transition is difficult enough in London, right? So try doing that, in a country with GDP per capita of X, right? I mean, this is not easy to do. So What I think is that you need the working coalitions, you need to keep the pressure up, you need to be shining the light, you need to be calling out and celebrating success, you need to be interrogating why some things don't work. But we've got to be finding ways to support the managerial capacity of countries to work their way through this.
Thank you, Rachel. You set out a vision at the outset, and it was very sort of powerful. And I remember being very moved by a speech you gave in London where you set it out there again. And I wondered to what extent you're going to win this. We're going to win this by effectively conjuring up that national and international scenario in 2024 or 2027 when effectively everybody has access to sufficient energy for their needs. And I was just wondering if you could sort of wave, it's a facile question in a way, but if you could wave a magic wand, what 2 or 3 things do we need to do globally to really make this happen over the next decade or so?
So, that's a really good question. So I think it's sort of like you have to sort of turn the thought process around. So, we want to give everybody healthcare, okay? So you want everybody to have healthcare. Then these clinics, these doctors' offices, these hospitals, they've got to have power. Okay, they can have power. It is possible to get them power. It's possible to get them power affordably, and it can be clean, and we don't have to choke the cities in so doing. And you can have those clinics in the informal settlements. You don't have to make them get on a bus and go to the centre of the city. And you can put broadband or Wi-Fi enabled television in the clinic, and the doctor can sit in the central hospital and talk to the patient in the local thing. And you can have that, and you can have that in 15 years or 10 years, but you will not have it if you do not invest in an energy system that allows that to happen. And so let's talk about the healthcare numbers you want to achieve. Let's talk about your educational attainment, and then let's talk about the cheapest, easiest, quickest way to get that done. And I think that's not the conversation we have. We have a conversation about emissions reduction. We have a conversation about gigawatts of power, and we have a conversation about whether special interest X, who has a piece of this coal company over here, and special interest Y, who represents this gas company over here, or this or special interest Z, who is trying to sell you a solar plant. Those are not the conversations that we're having enough of. And so I think that if we got price signals right in economies, you'd see much more grid-connected renewables tomorrow. I think if the international financial and donor community, which in the scale of things doesn't provide that much money, it's in the hundreds of billions, it's not trillions, but that money can be used as a leavening agent. We know it can be highly catalytic. They need to be working at a level of coherence, pooling their funding with less rules attached in a way that we've never been able to achieve. I mean, we need Marshall plans. We need things on those scales. And I think we need an extraordinary mobilisation of talent deployed in a different way, directly to countries, to sit in ministries and energy regulators and in utilities to help make this happen, and to train those around them. And I think that's it's at that scale that we need to be operating. So there's plenty for the finance ministers and the economists to do. There's plenty for the energy sector to do. There's plenty for the world that says it's there to help to do, but it all has to be done a little differently.
And fossil fuel subsidy reform would free up potentially good money for the kind of transformation that's required too.
Yeah, I mean, you need the price signals have to be right, and they have to be consistent. So you have to have an effective price. An effective price means that you're actually getting less carbon in your system. You've got to get rid of those subsidies. you've got to put a price on carbon or do something that tilts the balance away from heavy carbonised fuel sources, for air quality reasons alone, let alone any other reasons. So yeah, you've got to get your economics right, you've got to get coherence, and you've got to get long-term signals. So you have to build the political coalitions that this doesn't get changed every 2-3 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of subsidy work going on, but there's an urgency about this that I don't see everywhere.
Thank you, Rachel. And I suppose just one or two. Conscious of your time, and
Sure.
if I ask you just one or two last questions, if I may. One is,
Sure.
what do you say to a president or a prime minister or a finance minister in any country around the world who believes in the cause, but just doesn't believe that at the moment the kinds of energy systems that we're talking about are genuinely available at scale to meet the commitments that she or he has made? That's sort of one question in my mind. And then I suppose the other is just a sort of concluding thought from you about how optimistic you are that the world has woken up to this challenge before us and is beginning to act to really achieve the goal at scale.
So depending on which piece of the puzzle the minister doesn't believe is available to them, we're at the point where we can give them examples. So we can say, well, look at Chile and look how they bid out 6 new energy contracts, and every single one of them was won by a renewable energy consortium, and every one of them was won without subsidy, and every one of them was won at a really affordable price for power to the consumer. So, Chile's done it. Let me show you how Chile did it. Let me show you how South Africa ran a completely transparent bidding process for new power, and again, everybody that won was producing renewable. Let me take you to Morocco and show you what happens to the economy when you have consistent power coming from concentrated solar power farms out in the desert. Let me take you and show you how Iceland has been able to diversify its economy because it has access to not just to high heat geothermal, but to low heat geothermal. And then let me take you to the banlieue of Paris, where they're actually tapping into low heat geothermal and what that's doing to social housing and to small businesses in those parts of the city. I mean, so I can take you somewhere in the world and show you that this can happen. And I can also show you what is going to happen to the air quality in your cities where most people are moving over the next 10, 20 years if we don't have cleaner air and if we don't have a cleaner energy supply. So I think that, and then I think the other thing is that we can put numbers. Now, numbers alone have never moved anybody, but we can speak to leaders about if we can show you a pathway to achieving 85, 90% energy access in 10 years, why would you not do that? Why would you wait till 2045 or 2050? Because that's when the IEA says that you'll get to that point in the road. Why wouldn't you fast track this if we can show you that you can actually do it technologically and financially?
Brilliant.
But it's not why would you, but why would you not?
Yeah.
I think we're at a point where we can tilt that conversation around.
Fantastic.
What was the last question?
Optimism. Your vision. I mean, do you think we're winning? I mean, I don't know. Sort of. Can we do this? I mean, it's such a wonderful and vital and important cause. So just a concluding remark on that.
Well, so the optimism comes. I talked at one point and I said, the future energy system is not the one that we all grew up with, and so we're fighting incumbency and we're fighting inertia. The future energy system is going to be decentralized, decarbonised, and digitalised. Well, there's a fourth D in there, which a lot of people don't want to talk about. But as a result of digitalisation, decarbonisation, and decentralisation, the energy system of the future is going to be democratised too. And therein is the reason for optimism, because communities can get their hands on the technology, right? Communities can get themselves affordable power, and there is nothing more transformative. And so that's the reason for optimism.
Wonderful. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for the interview and for an inspiring and informative take on this challenge. And I wish you so well and look forward to writing about this in my book.
Oh, no, thank you so much. And,